Hello, this is episode 13 of the My Footballing Journey podcast, and this time I'm joined by the head of scouting at Partick Thistle, Tony Kinnear. Tony's someone I connected with a couple of years ago, and I'm delighted that he's joining us today to talk all about his journey, pass on some words of wisdom, and delve in to the fantastic world of football. So let's begin at the start of your journey, Tony. Tell me a little bit about how you ended up working in football and why you ended up working in football.
Thanks for having me on this podcast. For me, I suppose like most people who work in football, it comes from as a kid having a real passion for the sport. Growing up, my brother loved the game, kicking the ball around in the garden. Got me hooked at a young age, and then memories not just of playing but also of watching games as a youngster, remembering a lot of big European finals and stuff like that. I remember Forest winning the European Cup twice, and then Villa winning in Rotterdam as well. That are kind of the sort of the key events as a little kid that capture you, and then they build your passion for the sport. Really, yeah. Um,
Who did you grow up supporting?
Well, my brother was a Villa fan, so I ended up an awful lot of the time having to have his cast offs and walk around in a Villa kit. But to be honest, for me, I'm born and bred Northampton, and I was always a fan of the Cobblers, as sad as it probably sounds. But they're my local team, and I always wanted to go up there and watch them. I love standing by the dugout where Graham Carr was the manager, and listening to him when I was a kid, him firing a load of swear words off at his players to berate what they were doing or weren't doing. So yeah, that's kind of where my passion was in terms of watching, and then in terms of playing, I think I always enjoyed playing. I think technically I wasn't the worst player. I was okay, and I think on maybe some of the other attributes that we focus on as scouts, I fell well short. But no, I enjoyed playing as well. Had a period where I had a coach who bullied me as a kid, and wasn't very pleasant, and that kind of knocked me back a little bit in terms of playing as a kid. And um, I'm hopeful that sort of thing maybe is less prevalent these days, or eradicated from the game these days. But didn't enjoy that. But then got kind of back into it in school, and played for the school's team, and just sort of hung around the 6 yard box really for me, and tried to prod the ball in the goal when one of the better players was crossing the ball in for me. And I think that's where my interest kind of was really peaked in terms of tactics, and
Mm.
in terms of like the non sort of the non playing side of the game and the strategy to the game. We had a teacher who ran the football team. He was actually the geography teacher, and we used to nickname him Dulux Legs because he had really white legs, and we used to come out in a pair of shorts with these really white legs, and we used to say, "Here comes Dulux." But in fairness to him, he set us up in a fantastic way, just even as a school team, as sort of 13, 14, 15-year-old lads. Um, his tactical sort of input to us was very simple, but very enlightening for me. And then it sort of piqued my interest, and from there moving to adulthood, I then played again on Saturdays and Sundays, local leagues, amateur sort of stuff. And injuries then led to me running a team for a little while. We won a cup, so we did quite well. And again, that just further sort of pushed me down the route of kind of the non-playing side in terms of the tactical, the strategy element to it, and doing coaching badges and stuff. So did some of those, and then really just started to enjoy the game a little bit more, sort of from the sidelines rather than from being on the pitch. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think most people that I've spoken to so far across this series, obviously this is episode 13, so we've had a good few conversations now, and football's a love for life, isn't it? And I think everyone talks about football as something that really started for them as a kid, as someone very young. I mean, at what point did you possibly transition from that passion from a hobby side to going? actually maybe I want to do this more for work and I want to professionalize this a little bit? Was it around the time of doing in badges and stuff, or did you come across certain people?
Yeah, no, like I say, I did coaching badges and enjoyed doing those. But then I went to work in a school and I actually met I think he was like head of PE in the school. And he just happened to be a scout for West Ham. So, first team scout for West Ham. And I suppose that was my piece of luck, bumping into him and chatting to him. Got talking to him about football and we kind of hit it off. And then one day he just rocked up at my office. I wasn't on the teaching side of stuff at school. I was non-teaching staff. Rocked up at my office, knocked on the door, and said, "Are you free tonight?" And so I said, "Yeah, I'm free tonight." So he said, "Do you want to come with me to a game?" So I ended up just going to a game with him, and
Yeah.
all the teachers in the staff room chatting to them. I said, "Oh, well, Nick's invited me to a game tonight." And, "Oh, have you?" "Yeah, yeah. He'll take you once, and then he won't ever take you again. He'll just sit in the staff room and he'll slag you off that you know nothing about football." So um, I went with a bit of trepidation to that game and went and watched, expecting it was kind of going to be a one off. But he
Yeah.
worked for West Ham, so he's a scout for West Ham. So obviously, when you rock up at a football ground and a great club like West Ham, traditionally like a Premier League club, and you're sort of saying, "Well, I'm Nick from West Ham. I'm the scout sort of thing, and this guy's with me, and we're here to watch the game." Then, yeah, it's quite a surreal experience. The sort of the first time you sort of are involved in that happening. But yeah, no. Went to watch the game. It happened to be at Milton Keynes. It was MK against Stockport, and Ashley Williams was playing centre half for Stockport, and he got sent off. And after the game, Nick said to me, who was the best player on the pitch? Who was the guy who stood out for you? And I think I was meant to say like the centre forward for Milton Keynes, who he'd gone to watch, but I thought I'll be brave here and say what I genuinely think rather than kind of just being a yes man on it. So I said, "Oh, well, the guy who got sent off, I thought he was actually the best player on the pitch." And yeah, 2 weeks later, he knocked on my door and he said, "You realise that he got his red card rescinded?" Um, and I said, "Well, yeah, that was right because he took the ball, he didn't take the
Mm.
man." And he said, "Yeah," and he said, "Good spot that." He said, "Do you want to come to another game?" And that's kind of where it sort of like then started
Yeah.
to snowball for me a little bit to think a little bit that this is an interesting thing to be doing, outside of the day job and something that really interests me and sort of piqued my interest again in football because I'd stopped playing. So
Yeah.
wasn't coaching either at the time. So it was a great way to get back into the game and obviously, like you say, the game that we all love.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a sliding doors moment. And again, a common theme, everyone that I speak to, and the same for myself in my journey, there's always that moment, isn't there? You can call it luck, you can say that it's a break or whatever it is, but you'll always get that one opportunity. Something will happen, you'll meet somebody, and it's whether you take it, isn't it? And I think you touched on something there about not sitting on the fence and being brave. And I think it's that's the industry we're in, whether it's coaching, whether it's playing, whether it's scouting. Um, you can't sit on the fence in this game, can you? And I think that's possibly why it went so well for you then.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's probably the lesson we're talking here about scouting journeys and stuff, and hopefully helping other people out in their journey that they may be starting out. I think that was the thing for me. That was the key first lesson to learn. And I'll be honest with you, it's something that's just stuck with me every day that I do this job since that. I need to be decisive. I need to make a decision on a player. I can't sit on the fence. And I know sometimes I'm sure you're the same, Joe. Sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and sometimes you get it horribly wrong. But
Yeah.
I think you've got to be brave enough to make that decision, and you've got to be clear enough in that decision in terms of communicating it. That's a very critical thing for me in terms of the role.
No, definitely. And I think especially within recruitment, because obviously there's different sides of analysis and scouting, you've got performance and opposition. But I think especially within senior recruitment, ultimately, if you're not making judgment calls, then there's no point you going, is there? And that's what it boils down to. So let's kind of come back to the present day now. What does your role kind of entail, both on a day-to-day basis, but also kind of wider long-term aspects of what you do?
Yeah, so I head up the scout group at Thistle. I've got five guys that report into me, five scouts. We've previously had a data analyst as well, but we don't have that function now as it stands. So I do all the analysis, all the data analysis really for the club. It's not my day job. I've got a full time permanent job that I have to work around. So kind of for me, an average day might be I'll get up at 6 o'clock. I might go on Y Scout and watch some footage for a target that we've got in mind, a target player. Um, I might then do that for an hour or so. I might then do a bit of data analysis on that same player, say, take my lad to school, do the day job. I might pop in at lunchtime in terms of on my phone to check whether sort of agents have messaged me and stuff like that, and whether the manager at Thistle's messaged me. And then I'll finish my day job for the rest of the day, and then kind of clock off at 5 o'clock. And then most days I'm either off to a game or I'm back on to Y Scout or back looking at data. Might be checking out opposition and feeding through my thoughts on the opposition. I might be receiving information through from my scouts who have been at games. We've got three north of the border, three in Scotland, because obviously we're a Scottish club. So those three guys feeding into me, and then the two other guys we've got in England, they might be feeding in and might be talking about either as a scout group or individually about players that they're pitching that they're talking about. That's kind of like how an average day might go, and then further on in the evening, I might be off to a game. So if it's a
Yeah.
midweek, Tuesday night, then I might go to a game. So yeah, a hectic schedule, I suppose it sounds, but it's the way it has to work in terms of me working the football around a day job.
I mean, how did you find that transition from, obviously, as you said, when you were starting out, you went with someone from West Ham and you were kind of learning and now we come to the present day and you're kind of managing a team of people. What's the differences in terms of kind of going from giving your opinion upwards to taking opinions from below?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think I'll work on a sort of a collaborative nature and methodology with the guys. Um, I'm keen, as we talked about earlier, I'm keen for them to give me their honest opinion. I don't want people who are just going to say they like a player because they think I like a player. And we have a lot of kind of what you call healthy debate about players and stuff. We've even got players in our squad now that maybe one or two of the scouts weren't so keen on, and one or two of the other scouts were really keen on. And then I have to balance off where I think that player would fit in terms of what we need, what our priority is, and where he's going to fit in kind of our playing style, structure, and the philosophy of the team as the manager wants to put it out on the pitch. So yeah, it can be challenging. I'll be honest and say that I think I've got the best sort of set of scouts that anybody could ever have.
I
I
love
think they're
that.
a brilliant
That
group
that's
of guys.
leadership right there, isn't it? That's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm not blowing smoke at their arse either. They are a great set of
They're all
lads,
listening now.
and yeah. No, I'll be honest about it. They're a great set of lads, and they're kind of they just get on with their job. They're very low profile.
Yeah.
It's not about them. It's about finding the right players for us, and I think we work really well as a team. And I'd hope they'd say the same. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Obviously, you touched there about having, obviously some people based in Scotland, some people based in England. Obviously, as a Scottish club, you have to have that balance. What would you say the biggest differences are between English football and Scottish football?
I think for me, the league we're in is a really competitive league. I know everyone says that their league's competitive, but it is a really competitive league. Obviously, the finances can be a challenge for a lot of clubs in our league. I think in terms of the style of football and the style of play, I think there's a lot more physicality for me in the English game. There's a lot more teams that play a more direct style of play still, although albeit um, with the likes of Man City and Liverpool and teams like that at the moment. Who are sort of the top teams, and Arsenal are the top teams in England. That does filter down a little bit in terms of style of play, people playing out from the back and things like that. But I think in general, um, what you tend to find is the ball's on the ground a little bit more in Scottish football.
So, is there a kind of a piece of advice that you would give to anyone that's looking to work in the game, or maybe a piece of advice that you've received that you've kind of held on to over the years?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to just being decisive in your decision, clear in your decision making. I think sort of if you're talking about like tips and hints for people looking to get into the game or have just come into the game, I suppose for me it's a very competitive environment to work in. Everybody thinks they know football, don't they? Everybody's an expert. Everybody wants to be a scout. I say to people, I'm a scout. I could do that, and not so many people want to be a data analyst, but I think that'll come. My lad sits there. He's only 9. He sits there and writes Python programming code now better than I do. So I think maybe everyone will want to be a data analyst in sort of 10, 15 years time, perhaps. But right now, everyone thinks they can kind of do the scouting role and be a scout. So for me, it's just to have a little bit of polite persistence in terms of your aims and your desires and where you want to go. Don't be put off track by being rejected, and don't be put off track if you've got that belief that you can do the job. I think the big thing for me is learn from other people. I learned a lot in the early days from other people, and I always had an open mind to learning, and I still do. We've got as an example the other week. There's a guy who's doing some Thistle data off his own back, a Thistle fan, and that was flagged to me. And it'd be easy for me to say, well, no, I'm all right, thanks. We've already got our data analysis covered. I know what I'm doing. I know what the manager likes to see in terms of data and his assistant and stuff. But for me, it was like, oh no, actually, I'll get in touch. I'll reach out to this guy because he can probably teach me stuff that I don't know. He can probably tell me stuff about our own team that I don't know. So I think it's having that open mindset. Um, I think like I say, it's a very tough environment to work in because it is so competitive and everybody wants to work in it. But yeah, it's just to keep faith in it and keep learning and things like listening to this podcast is a helpful thing for people to understand sometimes the effort and the hard work that goes into the roles that are probably aspired to.
Do you think there is, at times, people that are looking to break into the game or possibly just have a lack of understanding at times about what it really takes in terms of dedication? I mean, I won't tell you how many miles I do a year, and I dread to think how many you end up doing. It isn't necessarily an easy job, even though it's a fun job, and it's certainly not brain surgery or rocket science, but there are a lot of graft elements to it. Do you think that there is a bit of a lack of understanding around that at times?
Yeah, I think potentially there is, and I think obviously it can be a tough environment to be in when your team's not winning, and you feel it. And I suppose for me, and probably for you, we're not the high profile. We're not the manager. We're not the guy standing on the touchline. We're not the boys or girls in the women's game in the arena playing the game. We're not in front of the crowd, but we still feel that pain. It's still as depressing for us when we're not getting the results. It's still as painful for us when we're putting the miles in, we're putting the effort in, you're putting the hard work in. I like to think my approach is professional and methodical, and I work really hard at this role in order to make the club I work for a success. But sometimes you do all that and then you don't get the results on the pitch for it. It can be a tough place to be, even as somebody who's not high profile, like I say, like a manager or a player.
No, very true. Very true. I completely agree. I think it's harder as well because you can't have a direct impact. You help pull a group of players together. They pair up with a group of coaches, coaching staff, even non-playing staff in terms of people that support the function of the club. Everyone comes together and then it's over to them, isn't it? On a match day, you're off at another game. You're keeping an eye on your club's score on the phone, or sometimes you get the chance to watch them, but ultimately you almost become a fan on a match day with no real impact, and the result hits you just as hard. And yeah, it is a tough world. It's very tough not to be able to impact.
I, I think for me that's the worst thing is it's nice. I watch my own team as much as I can. Often, like I say, via video. But I'll go up and to Glasgow, I'll go to Firhill. I'll watch Thistle play in the flesh, and it's so much easier to watch them in the flesh, watch them playing there, than to stand, I don't know, on a touchline somewhere like Leamington or somewhere like Capello at Morton, and keep checking your phone every 10 minutes to see what the score is. It's almost like a slow death sometimes. And I've got to the point now where I got to the point where I started checking in detail sort of shots on target and things like that, and then you check in possession, and you think, what am I doing? Because ultimately you could have 20% possession and win the game, or 70% possession and lose it. But it's almost, yeah, it's quite maddening at times to have to follow your team, knowing the effort that's gone into trying to win a game of football.
No, I've had to start pushing myself to put the moon on my phone until half time. I'll check at half time, I'll check at the end, but you have to acknowledge there's nothing you can do, and whether you check it and whether you refresh it, the score is the score. So, yeah, I mean, look, we're touching on some of the real nitty-gritty stuff, the stuff that's really behind the scenes here, and I think obviously, people that might be listening that maybe haven't thought about this line of work that are more interested from a very early starting point. Um, let's kind of go to some of the more overarching topics in terms of recruitment right now, long term. Obviously, you touched on data, um, and you talked about there, your 9-year old that's doing Python code, and you're right. We are possibly in a position where data is going to take over. I mean, where do you sit with it? Obviously, you said that data is something that you dive into more now. It's come into the game. It's getting bigger and bigger. Where do you think it goes?
Well, I think you should. I think you should. Data's there to support you. For me, data's not there to lead. Now, there might be people who challenge that, but I think it's a tool that you need to use. It's a critical tool now in football that teams use across the board. We probably don't use it quite as effectively and as efficiently as I would like and hope we would and could and should. I think when we do use it and we align it to the subjective side of things, to how players are performing in front of our eyes, and to our own knowledge. And I'm not just talking about myself personally, but I'm talking about scout team. I'm also talking about, the first team manager and the assistant and the other guys in his backroom staff that were feeding their opinion idea. I think for me, it's about trying to marry it all together and have kind of a more of a holistic approach to it. And I appreciate that some people prefer more of a data-driven approach, and some people a bit more old school and prefer to see just stuff with their eyes. But I'd always look at the data. The data is something I always refer to first, to be honest. We talk about a player that we're interested in, or an agent brings me about a player. I will always check their data. I'll often know that player. I'll often know what my personal subjective view of that player is, but I'll always check that data. Invariably, the data just backs up my view, and that's comforting.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when it doesn't,
Mm.
and
Well,
then
and you're
it's
trying to
it's
suss out, is the data saying this because of some context that the data doesn't understand,
yeah,
because it isn't a human being, or am I missing some context, or, so it is a balancing act, isn't it?
exactly, it is. And then there's elements of your natural bias as well. I know I've got natural bias against certain types of player and for certain types of player, and
Mm.
everybody will have a natural bias in one way or the other. And that is where I find the data more useful, because I can overcome often my bias by
Mm.
some effective analysis of the data. And in my day job, I'm an analyst anyway, so
Yeah.
it's quite natural for me to in terms of to think that way.
Yeah, no, very true. I think I think it's going to continue. I think we'll move more to physical data. I think clubs will start getting more access to that side of things, because I think that's what's lacking. I think you go into a Premier League club and they obviously would have access to a lot more data than possibly you or I currently have access to. But I think that will start to trickle down, and that's where we'll see changes. Um, I want to finish up talking a little bit about recruitment specifically. from a player standpoint. Obviously, we just had the January transfer window. Obviously, there's still a little bit more time to go in the loan market for you guys in Scotland. How
Yeah.
do you kind of handle the window? How do you handle the loss of big players? How was your process in terms of recruitment?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge. It's always more of a challenge when you lose players sort of for January. I mean, we brought Miles Roberts in. I obviously felt that personally when he went back to Watford, because that was one that I really kind of was keen for him to come in and pushed on him, and he was brilliant for us. Probably our player of the half season, really did a fantastic job. Um, but that's the nature of when you've got a lone player in. It's then thinking about what your alternatives and options are sometimes, and you'll appreciate this again, John, at the level we're working. It's very competitive. There's a whole host of players you need to filter through, and often the guys that you want to bring in go elsewhere, and for a whole host of reasons. And yeah, it can be difficult. I mean, at the moment, as we stand, we haven't brought another goalkeeper in. We had options lined up that for reasons that I obviously won't go into, that just didn't come off. We had the guys lined up. We knew there was a chance of Miles going, and we felt we were ready, but just sometimes things transpire against you. In the case of, I suppose, the other case that flagged up for the January window was Harry Milne. Was that
Mm.
he's been brilliant for us over sort of 2.5 seasons. He was a guy that 3.5 seasons ago we identified via data. We then tracked him for a season essentially, and then brought him in, and he did everything we were expecting of him. Um, he did a great job for us, and it's kind of one of those that we were again expecting him to go, and potentially, and again, we've got options kind of lined up. We've got a lad back from Hearts, a left back, highly rated left back in return, and we just felt for Harry that the deal was a really good deal, even if the timing wasn't ideal. So
Yeah.
again, it's one of those. I think the January window, like I say, is really tough. It's a lot easier in the summer to
Mm.
work stuff out. You've got a lot more time. You've got a lot more scope to
Mm.
think about your decisions. But when you've got sort of 30 days and the clock's ticking, it becomes a lot tougher. As you say, though, luckily for us, we've got a little bit more time, and
Yeah.
we'll be looking to bring a couple more guys through the door.
I think there's two aspects to recruitment, because you've got recruitment and you've got scouting, and they're very different things and they have to be coupled together. And I think everyone I speak to, we all love scouting. We all love getting out to our games. Those are the bits that are fun. You're on the road, you're watching players. Ultimately the windows make the job not about scouting. You're no longer looking at your targets.
Yeah.
From a supporter perspective, it's always, well, did we know about him? It's like, well, yeah, of course we knew about him. We know about everyone. There's a big difference between knowing about a player and being able to bring that player in, isn't there? And I think you touched on there saying it didn't happen for one reason or another, but that one reason or another are the bits that nobody really sees and possibly won't ever see.
Yeah, and I think that is a big challenge, and between the relationship between the club and between fans, that is often the biggest challenge is with recruitment. And can we bring a player in? We exactly the same point of view that you've just made. There are times where that all the fans, the whole sort of set of fans are saying, well, why are we not signing him? And we should be after him. And you're thinking, well, we've talked to him 2 or 3 times, and now he's just rang us yesterday and he's told us he's off somewhere else. And it's like one of those. And it's, why didn't we go for him? Well, we did go for him, but he
Yeah.
just didn't want to come to our club. And it can be very frustrating, and and really difficult to sort of to take when you know that there's frustration um, with the fans and stuff about certain situations and certain players potentially say going elsewhere, and you think we did everything we possibly could to try and acquire him. Well, we can't tell you all that. He's gone
Yeah.
now, and you've got to move on. And
Mhm.
I suppose that for me, I think that's probably another sort of pointer for me in my journey and my sort of a piece of advice to people is do have to have that ability to move on. As soon as
Yeah.
something's gone, you've got to move on to the next thing. And I think
And
I'm
block out
probably
the
quite
noise a little bit as well.
yeah, I think you do, and I think I've got better at that, and I think I'm pretty good at that anyway. That's probably is one of my strengths, my ability to say, well, he's gone, and let's move on. But it is difficult. It is challenging sometimes when yeah, you're getting all that noise about a certain player that you really wanted and you really did your best to get, and then they go to a rival or something, and
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think personally, I think there's loads of really good information in this episode and some great advice. And I'm sure those that are listening and those on the Patreon as well will all take a lot from it. So I really appreciate you jumping on and giving up half an hour of your time for us.
yeah, it's no problem. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy for people to connect via that route. And if anybody's listened to anything in this conversation tonight, and they want to talk to me further about it, they want to know a bit more, they want some more advice or anything, yeah, I'm more than happy to always. I think for me, it's a tough industry. It's very, very competitive, but there's no reason not to kind of be open and
Yeah.
sharing where you possibly can and support people on their own journeys. Because everyone has a different journey, don't they? And everyone has a different route potentially into football and then through their football career.
No, definitely. And if anyone wants to submit a formal written offer for any of Tony's fantastic scouts and try and steal them away from him, then you can get in touch as well. But no, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And like I say, I think loads of really good information in there. If you haven't signed up for the Patreon, then do think about it. Have a little search. It's another Nowhere Man. There's loads of insight there. There's some free game downloads if you want to practice some reports, bit of one-to-one advice with myself, and there's a little small community of people that are all eager to break in. Obviously, if you're part of the community, then you can obviously send over some questions for our guests. And if you want to get in touch with anyone that's on the podcast, then we can certainly hook you up. So certainly check that out. Thanks for listening. I think this has been a great episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time on the My Footballing Journey podcast.